I know a lot of you out there listening are feeling kind of on edge after this election.
Yeah.
Especially about immigration.
It's understandable.
It's tough seeing those headlines about mass deportations.
Absolutely.
And not feeling like a knot in your stomach.
Right.
So let's try to unpack this a bit.
Okay.
Trying to get you some solid info without the hype.
Yeah, cut through the noise.
We're diving into a New York Times piece today.
Okay.
It's called Se pegó el texto.
Interesting title.
To see how things are playing out right here in the city,
Yeah.
Specifically in New York.
Hyper local. Good.
Yeah.
It's smart to be informed,
Yeah.
not just alarmed.
Right.
And this article gets right to the heart of how folks in NYC's undocumented community are reacting to the election results,
Yeah, one thing that jumps out is the fear this new administration is bringing.
Yeah.
Especially with all the talk about reviving mass deportation programs.
It's like a flashback to Trump's first term.
Right, exactly.
All over again.
And the article captures that raw anxiety.
It does.
Like, it's not just abstract policy debates. It's people like Edwin Tito, a construction worker from Ecuador.
Right.
Worrying about ICE raids at his job site,
These are real lives hanging in the balance.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in those big numbers we hear.
Yeah.
Millions to be deported.
Years. Numbers.
But this article really puts a human face on it.
It does. It humanizes it.
And it's not just the undocumented folks themselves who are affected.
No.
The article mentions that since 2022, the city's seen a huge influx of asylum seekers.
Right.
And it's straining resources.
I can imagine.
Over $5 billion just for shelter costs.
Wow.
So that puts Mayor Adams in a tricky spot.
Yeah, that's where it gets interesting.
Right.
He wants to be welcoming to these newcomers, but he's also got to deal with budgetary realities.
Right.
It's a tightrope walk
Yeah.
between compassion and practicality.
It's like he's trying to hold on to New York's identity as a sanctuary city,
Right.
while also keeping the lights on, so to speak.
Yeah, the city has to function.
But on the other side, you've got this incoming administration
Right.
that's already hinted at cutting funding for sanctuary cities,
Yeah.
just like they tried during Trump's first term.
Exactly. So we've seen this before.
Right.
This highlights the power struggle between local and federal authorities.
When it comes to immigration.
Exactly. Can cities really resist federal mandates?
Right.
Or will they be forced to comply?
It's a big question.
It's a complex legal landscape
Yeah.
that we'll get into a bit later.
Okay, so big picture stuff aside,
Sure.
what does this actually mean for folks living here in NYC? The article brings up Operation Wetback,
Oh.
a 1950s mass deportation campaign under Eisenhower,
Wow, going way back.
which, believe it or not, has been cited by some as a model for future action.
And that comparison is chilling.
Right.
Operation Wetback was rife with racial profiling and disregard for due process. Bringing it up now raises serious concerns about potential human rights violations.
Right.
If history repeats itself.
Yeah, the article does a good job of reminding us that this isn't just some theoretical policy debate.
No.
It's got real historical baggage.
It does.
And even though public opinion on immigration has shifted
It has.
towards stricter measures in recent years,
Yeah.
the logistics of mass deportation are still a massive hurdle.
Absolutely. The American Immigration Council estimates a cost of $88 billion annually to pull it off.
Wow.
$1 trillion over a decade.
It's hard to even fathom that,
That's money that could be going towards education, healthcare,
right? All the things we need.
infrastructure.
Yeah.
Not to mention, you'd need a massive increase in ICE officers
Right.
and detention facilities.
So it's not just the money, it's the logistics of it all.
It's logistically daunting.
And then there's the legal minefield.
Oh, yeah.
Groups like the ACLU
They're ready.
are already gearing up to challenge these policies, drawing parallels to the legal battles fought against the Muslim ban
Right.
and family separations during Trump's first term.
So there's precedent.
Yeah.
Right? Any large-scale deportation effort would likely face a barrage of lawsuits,
Right.
potentially tying it up in courts for years.
Yeah.
This isn't a quick fix. It's a protracted legal battle waiting to happen.
Okay, so we've got this backdrop of fear and uncertainty.
Yeah, palpable.
But what does it actually mean for undocumented immigrants in New York City on a day-to-day basis.
Right, getting down to the street level.
The article digs into the city's sanctuary status
Yeah.
and how it might play out under the new administration.
It's important to understand what sanctuary city actually means in practice.
Okay.
New York's laws limit cooperation with IC, but they don't completely prevent IC from operating within the city.
So even though the city isn't actively helping with deportations,
Right.
IC can still conduct arrests and raids here.
Exactly.
Wow.
And during Trump's previous administration, deportations in NYC actually spiked
Really?
by 150% in his first fiscal year.
That's significant.
Plus, they used tactics like courthouse arrests,
Oh,
which ultimately faced legal challenges from the state attorney general.
so it's not just about whether these policies are legal.
No.
It's about how they're enforced
Absolutely.
and the chilling effect they have on communities.
It creates a climate of fear.
What kind of tactics might we see this time around?
It's hard to say for sure.
The article throws out possibilities, ranging from workplace raids to separating families, even targeting people with minor offenses.
It's a broad scope.
Right.
While ICE generally avoids arrests in sensitive locations like schools and hospitals,
Okay.
they can still operate in public spaces.
So imagine going about your day, never knowing if a trip to the grocery store or picking your kids up from school
Right.
could lead to an encounter with ICE.
That's a heavy weight to carry.
And it's not just about ICE actions, it's about the fear and uncertainty they generate.
Absolutely. That fear
Yeah.
can prevent people from reporting crimes, seeking medical care,
Right.
or even just going about their daily lives.
So it has ripple effects throughout the whole community.
It permeates everything.
The article also mentions a potential conflict brewing between Mayor Adams's stance on sanctuary laws
Right.
and the incoming administration's agenda.
This is where things get really complicated. Mayor Adams has suggested he might be open to modifying sanctuary laws
Oh.
to allow police to help deport migrants suspected of serious crimes,
Yeah.
even if they haven't been convicted yet.
Wow. That's a significant departure
It is.
from the city's traditional stance on protecting undocumented immigrants.
It raises questions about how far the city is willing to go
Right.
in cooperating with federal enforcement efforts.
Well, on one hand, you've got this massive federal push for deportations, and on the other, you've got a city grappling with how to balance its values with the pressure to comply.
Yeah, a real tug of war.
And caught in the middle are the estimated 412,000 undocumented immigrants
Wow. That many.
living in New York City.
Each with their own story, their own family, their own dreams.
This isn't just about numbers, it's about people.
It is.
And as the article points out, this is a diverse population.
Right.
Longtime residents, families with mixed legal status, essential workers who keep the city running.
The backbone of the city.
The article highlights the work of people like Jorge Paz Reyes,
Yeah, a real unsung
who
hero.
are trying to educate immigrants about their rights
Absolutely. Crucial work.
and how to interact with ICE.
Especially in this climate of fear and misinformation.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Right.
The initial reactions, the legal and logistical challenges of mass deportation,
Right.
and the specific concerns for those living here in NYC.
A lot to unpack.
I think we need to take a closer look
Right.
at the different groups of undocumented immigrants
Okay.
and how their vulnerabilities might vary.
Good point. Not everyone's in the same boat.
So we'll dig into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
Stay tuned as we unpack these nuances
Yeah.
and examine how these different legal categories might be affected by potential policy changes.
Sounds good. So as we were saying, it's vital to understand that undocumented immigrant
Right.
isn't a one-size-fits-all category.
Yeah.
Their legal situations are incredibly varied, and that directly impacts their vulnerability
Right.
in this new political landscape.
It's like trying to understand a city
Yeah.
just by looking at a map.
Okay.
You need to zoom in
Yeah.
to see the neighborhoods, the individual streets,
Right, the granular level.
to really grasp what's going on.
That's a great analogy.
So let's break down those
Okay.
different legal categories.
Sure.
The article draws a distinction between those who have old deportation orders
Yeah,
hanging over their heads
like a sort of Damocles.
and those who've arrived more recently.
Okay, so two distinct groups.
Exactly.
For folks with existing deportation orders,
Yeah.
the situation is especially precarious.
Right.
These are people who've already been through the legal process. A judge has ruled on their case,
No.
and their removal has been authorized. fast.
So for them, deportation isn't a hypothetical.
Right.
It's an immediate threat.
Exactly. IC could easily prioritize executing those outstanding orders.
So it's low-hanging fruit for them.
It's much simpler than starting new removal proceedings from scratch.
That's got to be terrifying for folks.
Oh, absolutely.
Who've built lives here, some for decades.
Yeah, put down roots.
Only to have that rug pulled out from under them.
It's heartbreaking.
What about those who've arrived more recently?
Okay.
Like the asylum seekers we talked about earlier.
Their situation is different in some key ways.
Okay.
Many folks who've arrived since 2022, especially those who entered through the asylum process, are in the middle of what's called removal proceedings.
Now, I know we hear that term thrown around a lot.
It's bureaucratic jargon.
Can you break it down in plain English?
Sure.
What does that actually mean for someone's day-to-day life?
Imagine it like this. Removal proceedings are like a legal waiting room.
A waiting room, okay.
You're waiting for your case to be heard by an immigration judge.
Okay.
Who will decide whether you can stay in the U.S. or not.
So it's like their day in court.
You have to present your case, and that takes time.
So it's not like they get off the plane and are instantly deported?
Not at all.
Okay.
While they're in this legal waiting room, they're allowed to stay in the country.
Okay.
And they can even apply for work permits.
So they have some semblance of normalcy?
They have some legal protections while their case plays out.
But I imagine that waiting game must be incredibly stressful.
Absolutely.
Not knowing what the future holds.
The immigration courts are notoriously backlogged.
Oh yeah, I've heard that.
So it can take years for these cases to be resolved.
Wow.
That means years of living in limbo, not knowing if you'll be able to build a future here, or if you'll be forced to leave everything behind.
And the article mentioned that the incoming administration might try to target these recent arrivals, even those who are still in the middle of this legal process.
That's right, and that's what has many people worried.
Yeah, understandable.
During his first term, Trump tried to speed up deportations and limit due process rights for asylum seekers.
Right.
And those moves faced serious legal challenges.
So we might see a repeat of that.
It's likely any similar attempts this time around will be met with fierce opposition from civil liberties groups.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
A real legal battleground.
So you've got those with old deportation orders who were immediately vulnerable.
Right.
And then those in removal proceedings facing this agonizing wait.
Absolutely.
And the threat of policy changes.
That could fast-track their removal.
What about other groups of undocumented immigrants, like those with temporary protected status?
That's another group facing huge uncertainty right now.
Okay.
TPS is granted to people who can't safely return to their home countries, often because of war, natural disasters,
things like that,
or other extreme situations.
The article specifically mentioned countries like Haiti, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Venezuela.
Places where it's simply too dangerous for people to go back.
And during his previous term, Trump tried to revoke TPS.
He did.
For many of these countries.
That move sent shockwaves through communities, causing panic and fear.
I remember that.
For hundreds of thousands of people who had been living and working here legally under TPS.
But those attempts to end TPS were blocked in court, right?
They were.
Okay.
But the article points out that Trump has hinted at trying again.
Oh, no?
Specifically mentioning Haiti.
So they're back in the crosshairs.
This has understandably reignited fear among TPS holders who now face the possibility of losing their protected status and being subject to deportation.
So for people from these countries who thought they'd found a safe haven here,
a refuge.
It's like the ground is shifting beneath their feet.
The rug pulled out again.
They're left wondering if their lives will be uprooted yet again.
And it's important to understand that many of these folks have been here for years, even decades.
Under TPS.
They've built lives, raised families,
contributed to society,
contributed to their communities.
To suddenly be told they have to leave would be devastating.
Devastating.
Not just for them, but for the fabric of American society.
Absolutely, it's a ripple effect.
It's like we're talking about numbers on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
But each one of those numbers represents a human being.
A real person.
With a family, a job, a story.
That's exactly right.
The article shares the story of Juan Navarro. A Venezuelan migrant with TPS.
Trying to make a life for himself.
Who's now worried about his family's safety in Florida.
In Florida.
A state that leans Republican.
That's a tough spot to be in right now.
It's a stark reminder that this isn't just a policy debate.
No.
It's about real people's lives.
It's about human beings.
It's a gut punch, realizing that even those who aren't facing immediate deportation are still living with this cloud of fear.
A cloud of uncertainty.
Hanging over them.
The threat of increased enforcement. The constant worry about what the future holds. The possibility of families being torn apart.
It's a lot to carry.
It all takes a toll. It creates a climate of anxiety
that permeates daily life.
It's like that saying, living with a sword hanging over your head.
But even in the face of this fear, the article also talks about the incredible resilience of the undocumented community.
They're strong people.
And the efforts to support them.
That's a vital point.
Right.
There are legal aid groups, advocacy organizations.
People fighting the good fight.
And community leaders who are doing incredible work.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
Providing resources, information, and legal assistance to those who are most vulnerable.
So there are resources out there.
And within immigrant communities themselves. There's a powerful network of support.
People helping each other.
People helping each other navigate this complex and often hostile landscape.
So even in these dark times, there's still points of light.
There are.
People fighting back. And refusing to give up hope.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that while the challenges are immense,
they're huge.
There's also a spirit of resistance.
It's inspiring.
A determination to fight for the rights and dignity of undocumented immigrants.
And that fight is happening on multiple fronts.
It is.
From legal battles to grassroots organizing to simply people sharing their stories and refusing to be silenced.
Their voices need to be heard.
Okay, so we've delved into these different categories of undocumented immigrants. Their specific vulnerabilities. And the work being done to support them.
A lot of moving parts.
But I'm curious how all of this might actually play out. In a city like New York.
In New York.
A place that prides itself on being a melting pot.
A beacon of diversity.
That's a crucial question.
It is.
And it's one we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Can't wait.
We'll look at the potential impact of these policy changes on the very fabric of New York City.
How it will actually affect the city.
Its social and economic landscape.
The nuts and bolts.
And how the city itself might respond to these immense challenges.
That's a big question mark.
Stay with us as we continue to unravel
this complex
and critical issue.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into how this election might impact immigration.
The rubber meets the road.
Especially here in New York City.
The heart of the matter.
We've talked about the anxieties, swirling around mass deportation, the legal maze.
That whole legal process.
And the human stories.
The people behind the numbers.
Behind the headlines.
Now let's zoom out a bit and consider the bigger picture. So big picture. How might these potential policy shifts reshape New York City as we know it?
It's a big question.
It is.
Especially when you think about New York's history as a haven for immigrants,
A melting pot.
It's always been this vibrant mix of cultures.
A global city.
A place where people from all corners of the world come to build new lives.
Exactly. And that's not just some feel-good story. It's woven into the city's very DNA.
New York's history, its energy, its creativity.
It all comes from immigration.
It's all inextricably linked to waves of immigration.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And the article really brings that point home.
It does.
It highlights how undocumented immigrants aren't just numbers.
They're
the backbone
We are.
of so many industries in this city.
Essential workers.
You're talking construction,
Yeah.
restaurants, home care,
All the behind-the-scenes stuff.
all those essential jobs that keep New York running.
They often fill roles
Right.
that many native-born workers aren't taking.
It's true.
And they do it for less pay
Yeah.
in tougher conditions.
They're essential,
Yeah.
yet often invisible.
Exactly.
Imagine trying to run this city without them.
It would grind to a halt.
It's not just about individual livelihoods.
No?
It's about the entire ecosystem.
The whole web of interconnectedness.
You'd have labor shortages, supply chains disrupted,
It would be chaos.
the cost of goods and services going up.
Inflation would skyrocket.
It would ripple through every borough.
Yeah, we often talk about immigration in abstract terms,
Mhm.
but the economic consequences would be very concrete.
Very real.
It's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet.
Right.
It's about the pizza place on your corner.
Yeah.
The people who take care of our elderly.
The folks building our homes.
Exactly.
And it's not just the economic impact either.
No, it's deeper than that.
New York prides itself on its diversity, right?
Mm-hmm.
That sense of openness
That welcoming spirit.
to different cultures, different languages, different ways of life.
That's what makes it New York.
That's what makes it so unique.
You hit the nail on the head.
Creating a hostile climate for immigrants.
Yeah, with the constant threat of raids.
With deportations?
Wouldn't just be inhumane.
Right.
It would fundamentally change.
Change the character of the city.
What New York City is.
It could breed fear and distrust.
Yeah.
Not just within immigrant communities.
No, it would spread.
But across the city.
It could erode that sense of shared identity.
Right.
That we're all in this together spirit.
Yeah.
That New Yorkers are known for.
And then you have the potential for family separations.
Heartbreaking.
The trauma of children being ripped away from their parents.
Inhumane.
The fear of mixed status families constantly looking over their shoulder.
Living in fear.
It's not just about policy, it's about the human cost.
Exactly.
We can get lost in the legal arguments and the policy debates.
It's easy to do. But we can't forget that behind all of that are individuals, families, communities.
Real people.
Trying to build a life.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that the stakes are incredibly high.
They are.
Both for undocumented immigrants and for the city itself.
For everyone involved.
There's a lot of uncertainty.
A lot of unknown.
A lot of potential for things to go wrong.
But there's also reason for hope.
There is.
We've talked about the incredible resilience of immigrant communities.
Yeah, their strength.
The organizations fighting tirelessly to support them.
Those on the ground.
And the potential for the city to push back against harmful policies.
New Yorkers have a history of standing up for what they believe in.
They do.
Fighting for a more just and inclusive society.
That's the spirit of New York.
And that's where you come in, you know? Staying informed, getting involved in the conversation.
Making your voice heard.
Supporting organizations on the ground.
Putting your money where your mouth is.
These are all ways to make a difference.
Big or small, every action counts.
Your voice matters. Your actions matter.
Don't underestimate yourself.
It can feel overwhelming, I know.
It can.
But even small acts of solidarity can have a ripple effect.
They spread outward.
Whether it's donating to a legal aid organization, volunteering your time,
giving your time and energy,
or simply having open and honest conversations with your friends and neighbors.
Breaking down those barriers.
And we can all play a part.
So as you reflect on everything we've discussed today,
yeah, it's been a lot.
I'd like to leave you with one final thought.
Okay, hit me.
What does it mean to be a New Yorker in these times?
That's a good question.
How can we ensure that this city remains a place of hope and opportunity?
Yeah.
Not just for some, but for all.
That's the challenge.
It's a question we all need to grapple with.
For sure.
And one that will shape the future of this city.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We encourage you to keep learning, keep questioning.
Stay curious.
And keep pushing for a more just and compassionate world.
That's what it's all about.